Metaverse has exploded into the mainstream over the last 12 months.
We believe the Metaverse will be the successor to the mobile internet.
They're in the Metaverse.
What the heck is the Metaverse anyway?
For many people, it's the first time they've considered the implications, both positive and negative. Personally, I've been thinking about the Metaverse for over 30 years, and while I'm still excited about the positives, I'm increasingly terrified about the dangers. And believe me, I wasn't always the one sounding the alarm. In fact, this is me in 1992. Back in the early 90s, I was a researcher at Stanford and NASA and the US Air Force, where I developed the world's first augmented reality system. The research was a success, showing we could boost human performance when merging the real and virtual into a single reality. But more importantly, I got to see how excited people were when they climbed out of the system with huge smiles. Now, 30 years later, major corporations are spending billions to bring the Metaverse to consumers. They envision a world where virtual and augmented reality will touch all aspects of our lives. There is no doubt the Metaverse is coming, and yes, it will be magical, but at the same time, it could greatly distort our world, spreading misinformation and polarizing society far worse than any form of media to date. It's not the technology that's dangerous. It's the prospect that large corporations will be able to use the Metaverse to manipulate our experiences on behalf of the highest bidder, persuading us in ways that make social media seem quaint. But it's not too late. Here's what we need to do about it. This is the classroom from More Perfect Union.
Have these people all lost touch with reality? In a way, yes. This is virtual reality.
First, let's talk about what the Metaverse is. In today's world, we view digital content from the outside looking in. In the Metaverse, we'll experience digital content from the inside, interacting with it all around us. And we'll do it together, in shared environments populated by our friends, family, coworkers, everyone. It can be fully virtual, where people are avatars. I would call that a virtual metaverse. It could also be layers of virtual content overlaid on the real world. I would call that an augmented metaverse. My view is that within 10 years, most people will spend at least 2 hours a day in the virtual metaverse, using it for shopping, socializing, entertainment, and targeted business applications. It will be very popular for short-duration activities, like television today. At the same time, I believe that within 10 years, the augmented metaverse will become the central platform of our lives. When people walk down the street, they won't be staring down at their phones. They'll be seeing content splashed all around them, embellishing our world with layers of information.
You could use a Guinness right about now.
Whether virtual or augmented, the metaverse has the potential for remarkable creative applications. But there are also great dangers. Social media platforms already track your behaviors online. In the metaverse, they'll track much, much more. Where you go, what you do, who you're with, where you look, even how long your gaze lingers. The platforms will even monitor your facial expressions and vocal inflections and vital signs. I know this sounds creepy, vital signs, but smartwatches can already do this, and before long, the sensors will be built into your earbuds, tracking your heart rate, your respiration rate, your blood pressure, and they'll use this data to predict your emotions. Yes, this is a privacy concern, but to me that's just a small part of it. The bigger issue is what the platform providers will do with this intimate information. And what they will do is target you. After all, that's the big tech business model. Create a profile of people's behaviors and then sell it off to the highest bidder. We only have to look at the billions of dollars of venture capital money flooding into metaverse products to see that these tools of deception will be used on behalf of large corporations. It will be an advertising revolution. With AR and VR, marketing won't be the overt pop-up ads of today's internet, but subtle, simulated additions to our world that look and feel real. Think of the film The Truman Show. In the movie, Jim Carrey lives in a completely fake world. The whole world revolves around him. Within the world of The Truman Show, advertising is presented as just another naturally occurring part of the reality.
All natural cocoa beans from the upper slopes of Mountain Nicaragua, no artificial sweeteners.
What the hell are you talking about?
The metaverse will trap all of us within our own unique Truman Show, with platform providers pulling the strings, crafting experiences all around us on behalf of paying advertisers. Imagine that you're walking down the street in a metaverse, and maybe you see people walking the other way drinking a particular brand of energy drink. And eventually you start to think, wow, that brand is really popular. What you don't realize is that whole experience was manufactured on behalf of a paying advertiser and targeted specifically at you. In other words, you form ideas about your world, about your community, without realizing that most people are not seeing what you're seeing. It was just designed for you. And it doesn't need to be something benign like energy drinks. It could be political messaging or misinformation. For that, let's consider another 90s blockbuster about the nature of reality, The Matrix. In that film, there are computer programs who move in and out of the world as agents of the Matrix. They look like humans, sound like humans, and move through the world like any other human. Similarly, the metaverse will be populated with AI avatars that engage you in promotional conversation, and you may not even realize that they're not real people. Some people think, oh, I'll be able to tell the difference, I'm not stupid. Well, take a look at the following faces here. Which of these images do you think are real human beings and which are computer-generated faces? I'll wait for your answer. Okay, think you got it? Well, the fact is, all of these faces are computer-generated. A study this year from Lancaster University found that most people are not able to distinguish between computer-generated faces and human faces. And not only that, the people surveyed found the computer-generated faces to be more trustworthy than the human faces. You might think, okay, fine, this is all scary, I'll just choose not to take part in the metaverse. Problem solved, right? No, it will feel no more optional than internet access feels optional today. You won't unplug your AR system because it would make important aspects of our world inaccessible to you, putting you at a disadvantage socially, economically, and intellectually. The fact is, the technologies we adopt in the name of convenience rarely remain optional. Don't get me wrong, the metaverse has the power to enrich our lives in wonderful ways. I am confident that AR and VR will enable surgeons to perform faster and better, construction workers, engineers, scientists, artists, everybody. But the metaverse also will make us far more dependent on the insidious layers of technology that mediate our lives. Sounds like a dystopian future, right? Well, it's not too late to change things. Right now, the metaverse is where social media was 20 years ago. The industry is so enthralled by the utopian possibilities, nobody is focused on regulating the dangers. Of course, we can all see how hard it is to undo the damage of social media now. We can't repeat this mistake with the metaverse, which means pushing for meaningful regulation now. Of course, the big question is, what should we regulate? I believe we should focus on metaverse platforms. That's because they are uniquely positioned to A, monitor user behaviors at profoundly intimate levels, and B, manipulate our experiences in extremely persuasive ways. First, let's talk about limiting how they monitor us. The metaverse platforms need to be able to track what you're doing, where you're going, and what you're looking at in order to simulate the virtual world around you. But they don't need to store this information and build personal profiles of your behavior over time. We need to place limits on behavioral profiling in the metaverse, maybe even ban it outright. Otherwise, they'll be characterizing our whole lives, and eventually we'll be able to predict exactly what you're likely to do in almost every situation. The platforms will eventually track your facial expressions, your vocal inflections, your posture and gait, all with the goal of assessing your emotional state. They shouldn't be allowed to perform emotional profiling over time. If they can profile your emotional reactions day after day, they will be able to characterize how you will react in a wide range of situations. That data could be used to persuade and manipulate consumers more effectively than any form of media to date. Finally, platforms will push to monitor vital signs. They should not be allowed to store this type of data for anything other than health and wellness applications, certainly not to characterize your reactions to advertisements. Now let's turn to manipulation. We need to regulate advertising in the metaverse, requiring transparency, so consumers can tell the difference between a virtual product placement that is put there specifically to target you and everything else in your world. The same concerns extend to AI avatars that will engage us in promotional conversation. Platforms should be required to make AI avatars look different and sound different and act different than other people. And consumers should be able to see who paid for each promotional conversation and what was their specific agenda. Unless this is regulated, we could all end up living in a metaverse that looks and feels natural, while behind the scenes, powerful corporations are manipulating our perception of reality for the highest bidder, without us even realizing it. That's not the future we want, which means regulation is both necessary and urgent. Politicians need to pay attention to this issue now. Like it or not, the metaverse is here. But what the future looks like is up to us.
Thank you for joining us in The Classroom, a series by More Perfect Union. We're taking on right-wing propaganda and telling the stories that corporate-backed media ignores, while seeking out solutions for a better future for all Americans. So join us, like and subscribe.
Wow, that's such an eye-opener, and truly going to the classroom or the metaverse understanding, that's the perfect tone to why we are assembled here today, what we have to worry about. But let me, at this point, also bring on stage Dr. Louise Rosenberg, who is with us today in the avatar form, who you just heard from. Thank you, Louise, for joining us. Really, really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Yes, we can hear you great. And so we talked about so many insightful things. Today's theme is human rights. So I wonder, Louise, what kind of new human rights might be needed for the metaverse?
Yeah. So when thinking about human rights for the metaverse, I think it's useful to just set the context a little bit and think a little bit into the future. Think about the 2030s, and I say that because the work we do today is really for preparing for the future. And in the 2030s, the metaverse is not going to be cartoonish. It's going to be deeply realistic. It's going to be deeply impactful. We're going to think back to today when we're all in this room together, and we clearly know this is not reality, and we're going to think that was those quaint early days. Today is the Pong version of the metaverse, and so very often when I talk to people about what the metaverse is really going to be like, I say, next time you're out in a real restaurant, having a real meal with other people, tell yourself, one day the metaverse will be this real. It will look this real all around us, and it will have that level of impact. And it's also important to realize that the metaverse is not just going to be virtual worlds; it's also going to be augmented worlds, which means it will be everywhere. And it's important to realize that people are going to need to use it for critical services, critical activities in their daily life. You will, in the 2030s, need to enter virtual worlds for shopping, for education, for your profession. It's not going to feel optional to you. It's going to feel just as much as a requirement as using the internet today. And it's also going to be augmented world, meaning you will have virtual content all around you during your life and during your daily life. And by that, I mean, right now, when you access your digital world, you're doing that through your phone. You're staring down a little screen on your hand. And in the 2030s, that little screen in your hand is going to go away. It's going to get replaced by eyewear, and virtual content is going to be everywhere. And it's going to be how you access your daily life from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep. And so it's very realistic scenario that in the 2030s, the phone is gone. It's now stylish, lightweight eyewear, and the metaverse is everywhere. From the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep, most of it's augmented, but a lot of it is entering virtual worlds. And so we should think of it as this coming ubiquitous technology. And there's a very good chance this technology will be controlled by large platforms. Those large platforms could be controlled by corporations or state actors, depend on where in the world we're thinking. And these platforms, just by their very nature, are going to be able to track everything that you do and then modify the world around you in real time. That simple idea is something that we should say, imagine that our reality is going to be something that a third party is going to be able to mediate, tracking everything you do and modifying the world around you in real time. Does that sound dangerous? Does that sound like something that should have policy and regulation and human rights to protect? Does it sound like something that could impact our agency and free will? I think it does. And I say that as someone who is who is actually a fan of the metaverse. And I've been involved, for over 30 years. I've been a researcher working on reality, augmented reality technology. I've founded multiple companies in virtual reality and augmented reality. I believe in the profound benefits that this technology can bring. And so I raise these concerns not as somebody who is a detractor, but as somebody who says, this technology is profoundly powerful. And because it is so powerful, we have to consider the dangers and think about what human rights are needed. And on the positive side, the power of the metaverse, whether it's virtual or augmented, is that it presents information to people in the form that we evolved to receive information. We evolved to perceive our world as spatial information that we can engage all around us. It's how our perceptual system works. It's how we understand our world. It's how we interact with our world. It's how we remember our world. It's how we build intuition and wisdom. The metaverse will have profoundly beneficial impacts to all aspects of society. But that profound power also means that it can be used in negative ways. And that's why I really believe we need to consider protections, because when you consider that whether it's a corporation or a state actor that could potentially track everything you do, and not just your actions, but your behaviors, meaning a state actor or a corporation can track who you're with, what you're doing, where you're going, what you're looking at, how long your gaze lingers, what your posture is while you're looking at things, look at your facial expressions, your vocal inflections, look at your hand gestures, your emotions, and determine how you feel. So we're talking about a technology that could understand everything you're doing, understand exactly how you feel while doing it, and then potentially alter your reality on behalf of a paying sponsor.
So
That's dangerous. Yeah.
We have 10 minutes left. And I know you have some of the top of the line, like human rights that may be needed and listed. But I wonder, April, what do you think? We should maybe allow our audience to have this moment with Dr. Louis Rosenberg and maybe ask a few questions?
Absolutely. Absolutely. With the minutes that we have left, I know there are questions because I have some, but we will have the audience chime in at this time.
Are you ready for some question and answers from the audience?
Sure.
All right, so how are we going to do this? We are going to allow everyone to raise their hands. And once you raise your hand, the hand raise should be open for all. And once you raise your hand, you will be enabled, your mic will be enabled, so you can ask a question. And we have allowed the hand raises. Anyone who wants to ask questions can click on the hand raise, and then they will show up and we will allow you to open your
So
mic.
you do not necessarily have to walk to the mic.
Go. Noble, who just raised his hand. All right, Noble, I think you are already ready to go. So you can unmute and possibly ask a question. And anyone else who wants to raise hand, please go ahead. Let's hear from Elle. Just have to unmute and you can speak.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Elle. If you could come a little bit closer to the stage, because your mic is quite low, even though we've kind of amplified your voice.
Is that better?
That is certainly getting better as you come closer.
Not now.
Sure, I will repeat your question, Al, as you speak.
I'm certainly concerned about us bringing some of the inequities or some of our challenges that we have in the real world into the metaverse. What is the current thinking on that? Not just,
So, Em, that's a good
messages from corporations, but
right. So the question was, what about bringing current inequities into the metaverse, which is definitely, I think, a significant concern, and really would go to the type of human rights that we should think about. One category of human rights that we're definitely thinking about is this idea of just equal rights, equal access, and equal status inside of virtual and augmented worlds, inside of the metaverse. And again, if a third parties can have control over your environment, your reality, in a targeted basis, they could give different groups different realities. Like that's like when we think about the metaverse, like that's really terrifying. And so there should be a fundamental right to equal rights, equal access, equal status, regardless of race, gender, religion, ethnicity, sexual orientation, or other discriminatory categories. It should be fundamentally given that that the ability to target people and target what they see and hear in the metaverse should not be done in ways that disenfranchise any group. And because it's so easy for that to happen in the metaverse, because it's all software. We need that protection even more than we potentially need it in the real world, where all those problems exist, but it's not as easy to just deploy disenfranchisement at scale as it would be in the metaverse if there aren't protections.
And Louis, so thank you for that response, and thank you, Al, for asking that question. I'm getting a direct DM to the question where somebody wants to know what about some of the top of the rights? What kind of new rights are you thinking about are needed for confronting reality?
Right. So, great question. Again, when we're thinking about the metaverse, we have to be thinking about a world where your reality is potentially controlled by third parties. Could be state actor, could be corporation. And the question is, how do you know how do you know the things that you are seeing are actually authentic versus engineered content that was targeted at you? And so in the example in the video is, well, what if I'm walking down the street and I see a parked car and I notice it and I hear some people talking about it and I learn something about it and I keep walking and I think, oh, like that was a cool car and the driver likes the car. I heard them talking about it. And I don't necessarily realize, no, that was a targeted promotional experience that was put there into the world by a third party for me to experience. Other people didn't see that. Or a state actor put something in that is propaganda, or and I see it, maybe other people don't see it. And so this right to authenticity of experiences, I think, is something that's fundamentally new and different, where you should have the right to know if something was put into your surroundings, put into your reality, put into your world by a third party in a targeted way, for you to see, to influence you, potentially selected based on your behavioral profiles or emotional profiles. You should have the right to be able to distinguish natural, serendipitous, organic experiences that everybody else is having and things that are targeted and influencing you. And that also goes to virtual agents, meaning if you're approached by a virtual agent an AI-controlled avatar that looks just like everybody else and can engage you in conversation, and that conversation will be natural. We've seen with large language models how natural it is already. If you're engaged in a promotional conversation with an AI agent that's maybe been put there to talk to you about a product or service or idea and maybe persuade you, you have the right to know that that's not just another user, that's not just another person, that's actually a piece of promotional content. And so the ability to know what's authentic and know what's targeted becomes so important in the metaverse, because the boundaries between what's real and what's promotional could become invisible otherwise.
Amazing. I think we have one more question here. Let's see if we can get that. And I do know Noble in the audience is also trying to ask questions. Many more. But yeah, if we can get another audience. Elena, we're up next. Please go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
I was wondering, it sounds like as you're talking about a lot of human rights, and I totally am with you and agree with you on that. I was wondering, what do you see as the kind of route to securing those rights? Do you see that as something that is more of a political action, or do you see that as kind of coming from, community organizations? What do you see as the route to securing those rights for VR users?
Thank you, and
So I think
you have 1 minute. 1 minute to address. Yeah.
So the quick answer is it's really all of the above. I think part of it is educating the public and educating policymakers that this transition into the metaverse, this transition into immersive worlds, is different. It's just like social media created new problems that didn't exist when from television and radio. The metaverse will create new problems that don't exist when we're talking about today's technology. And so educating people, educating policymakers, and then working directly with policymakers in different nations around the world is so important, so that we do this right. And the thing that I like to tell people, and I think the most important message, is that now is the time to put policy, put regulation, put rights in place, because the metaverse is in its infancy. The business models haven't developed yet. Large corporations can build their business models based on knowledge of policy now. If we try to wait until after the problems emerge, we'll have a situation like we have with social media, where nobody expected it to be dangerous. And by the time policy tried to get put into place, massive corporations relied on those practices. Now is the time to put safeguards in place for the metaverse. It will be good for people, and it will be good for the industry, because they want to have a world that people can trust.
Thank you so much, Luis. In the interest of time, I appreciate you on behalf of everyone. Thank you, everyone, for asking questions. We'll take 5 minutes break, and we will return back in 5 minutes for our next session. So stick around, take a water, get out of your VR headset, and let's come back in 5.